West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
In a newly released portion of a taped deposition, former President Donald Trump did this.
I decline to answer the question. I decline to answer the question. Same answer, 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 same answer.
More than 400 times, Trump pleaded the fifth to a rapid-fire line of questioning coming from the New York Attorney General Letitia James's office, part of her civil investigation into the Trump Organization's business practices. The deposition, a rare window into how Trump acted under oath.
Anyone in my position not taking the Fifth Amendment would be a fool, an absolute fool.
And a major reversal from what he once argued in public, on the campaign trail and as president.
You see, the mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
In the August deposition, Trump used his opening remarks to lash out at the Attorney General, who was sitting in the room with him, claiming the probe was political and repeating one of his familiar phrases.
This is the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country.
And criticizing how James campaigned for her office.
It's important that everyone understand that the days of Donald Trump are coming to an end.
Promising to bring Trump to justice.
We cannot permit a renegade and out-of-control prosecutor to use this investigation as a means of advancing her political career.
All claims James denies. The contentious sit-down took place just 2 days after the FBI searched Trump's Mar-a-Lago home for classified documents. 1 month later,
claiming you have money that you do not have does not amount to the art of the deal. It's the art of the steal.
James announced her office's $250 million civil lawsuit against Trump, 3 of his children, and the Trump Organization, accusing them of manipulating the value of properties to make more money. Many questions directed to the former president during the deposition focused on financials.
You reviewed this document with Alan Weisselberg and your son Don Trump Jr. before it was finalized as part of the 2019 Statement of Financial Condition. Is that correct?
Same answer.
Trump continued to plead the fifth when asked about the company's former CFO, Alan Weisselberg, who is now serving time after making a plea deal with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in a separate case.
Mr. Weisselberg, do you have plans to return to Trump work when you're done?
A case that found the Trump Organization guilty on 17 criminal counts, including tax fraud.
And the Trump Organization denies the allegations made by the AG's office, including those against the Trump family and company executives. This case is expected to go to trial in October. Aaron Trump and his attorneys have tried to delay that start. So far, they have been unsuccessful.
All right, Brian, of course, that timing puts you right ahead of the beginning of the primary season. Thank you. And Ryan Goodman joins me along with John Dean, both out front. So, Ryan, we know that Trump obviously has previously given his opinion of people who plead the fifth, right? That this is for something the mob does, right? You only do it if you're guilty. But just taking aside his point of view, from a legal perspective, right? He went in there, chose to do this under legal counsel. What does it tell you that he chose to invoke it more than 400 times?
So I think it means he's in trouble legally, at least in the civil case. If you're in a criminal case and he pleads the fifth, it can't be used against him. But in a civil case, there's plenty of New York state law and around the country.
So they can?
Absolutely. In fact, the jury will probably see the same videotape in full each time that he tried to plead the fifth.
Because as we were joking, if we played all 400, everybody, that would have still taken several minutes. Yeah.
That's right. So they could make 400 adverse inferences in a certain sense, meaning that they can say, because he took the fifth, it is a suggestion of wrongdoing, and the American public can make the same inference themselves. In law, you can do it in a civil suit, and we could do it ourselves to think of it that way. And it's interesting that he himself said, anybody in my position would be a fool, an absolute fool for not taking the fifth. Well, his son, Don Jr., and Ivanka Trump, according to CNN's reporting, within the 2 weeks before his deposition, they were deposed. They didn't take the fifth.
Right, and he did. And as you say, it's crucial that it can be used as evidence in the civil case. So, John, let me play some more video from the Trump deposition, as Ryan's pointing out, that the federal grand jury will see. This is just after Trump stated he would be taking the fifth throughout the deposition. So he announces this, and then this happens.
So, Ms. Trump, I take it you are not going to answer any questions about your preparation today with your counsel. Is that correct?
Should I say this, or should I respond to that?
Just read that.
For all of the reasons provided in my answer, which is incorporated herein in its entirety, I decline to answer the question.
That was the first time, and then, of course, there were about 400 after that, John. You say his decision to do this, to invoke the fifth in this way, is unprecedented?
Absolutely. I certainly know Nixon gave a number of depositions post-presidency, and I've looked around to see if he did, and there's no indication he ever gave a Fifth Amendment invocation. He didn't do so when he was before a grand jury, still looking at Watergate after he'd left the office. And I can't find, Aaron, any president who ever has invoked the Fifth Amendment. So this is unprecedented.
Wow, which is amazing. And Ryan, it's just, as you point out, shows he could possibly be in real trouble to do that because it can be used against him. But there's the other legal issues. And I'm not even talking about the January 6th and the federal grand jury in Georgia and all of those issues. How about just basically the grand jury that was just convened in Manhattan to begin presenting evidence in a case related to Trump's role in hush payments to Stormy Daniels, the adult film star. This case seemed to be going nowhere, and now suddenly you've got the DA bringing witnesses and you've got a grand jury. What does that mean?
So it sounds like they're very serious. You don't bring a grand jury unless you're seriously considering criminal charges, and New York has a special rule for the statute of limitations that otherwise people might have thought would have run by now due to COVID. So
it got you got an extra. You got to buy.
And everybody did in a certain sense, all their cases. So I think that's very serious, and it does mean that the district attorney might be mounting a criminal case. Now it has to be a pretty sophisticated case because the charge for falsifying his business records for hush money payment would be a misdemeanor. They have to tie it to another crime, but that might be like a New York State election law crime, and that's what the focus will be on.
So all of this mounting, just as people were thinking, perhaps it was only the federal grand jury in January 6th in Georgia, all of these things as well.
It is Wednesday, the 1st of February of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and Gunnar the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, because we have some meddlesome priests and their congregation that we need to be rid of. Yes. Well, with only a very a gossamer thin majority in the House, the MAGA Nazis, as I like to call them for short, are going full bore on, whatever it is that they're doing. They always say they have a mandate, no matter how tenuous it may be. And by tenuous, I mean George Santos voluntarily stepping away from his committee assignments. Give me a break. He was given an offer he couldn't refuse. And they need him still because, they need every vote they can get to get Ilhan Omar out. off of the Foreign Relations Committee. My God. Well, we all know that that is just, well, Muslim bigotry through, and we know it. And how do we know it? Well, members of that committee have already gone on the record from previous statements saying that she is not legitimate in terms of her representation of her district because she did not take the oath of office on a Bible. You know what? You can take the oath of office on a stack of Peanuts cartoons. Charles Schultz. But what do they know about America? They never studied it. How many times have I heard, and you as well out there in radio listening land, how many times have you heard this group say, I'm not about following the rules, I'm about changing them, and yet they have no idea what the rules are. They have no idea. They're making it up as they go along, and this is why. It's important to indoctrinate your kids about what American constitutional government is. Yeah, everybody can get a gun, nobody can get a book. And look, here we are. Here we are. First day that DeSantis signs his everybody can carry a gun permitless bill. Some guy shoots up drive-by shooting and 9 people were immediately wounded. And I think that there's like 11 to 15 now that have been reported touched by bullets that just seem to have exited this gun. Yeah. Okay, everybody can get a gun. Nobody can get a book. These images of teachers covering their books in their classrooms because they could be charged with a felony in the United States of America. All right. Well, here we are. We just let it happen, I think. Did we? I don't know. Did we? I actually think that we raised our voices loud and clear, and pretty much we were mocked by friend and foe alike. And now here we are. I don't want to sit around and say I told you so, because we got a lot of work to do. But boy, I got to tell you, getting back in the trenches and clawing it out with our bare hands is going to be hard not to think about. I told you so. So much for the wisdom of the elders, huh? Jeez. We were all warned, and apparently some of us took it to heart, heeded the warning, and tried to do something about it. But, I don't know. Idealists, we were called. Yeah. As if wanting a better world, there's something bad about that. Something immature. Well, you're not willing to lie to someone? What are you, a hippie? Well, hippies lie a lot now, too, apparently. Jeez. Well, it being Wednesday, and we do have a bit of, we did obviously curate a show for you because that's what we do. You know, I wanted to get in at the top. I don't normally draw from CNN anymore, and you know why. And I will confess that on that clip, I did edit out there's no other way of putting it, a tirade against Joe Biden for having, I don't know, mysterious documents showing up on his properties. I'm just wondering how that works. Because the DOJ wants to know, too. Joe is cooperating in every way. I haven't been able to watch this newest search of some home or property somewhere, but the press is all a titter over it. And yet the Cryon says that the White House counsel said this is all planned. The archives wanted to look at these other properties like they're looking at Jimmy Carter's properties. Yeah, we're going to have to search Habitat for Humanity for some top secret docs. Yeah. We know what's going on here. Now, if this was a Le Carre novel with intrigue and such, it'd be hard not to write into the plot that with what we already know. A rogue Secret Service that the president does not trust. Even his dog didn't. Remember when Major was accused of biting a Secret Service agent's hand? I wonder why. Major knew, and they got rid of him, didn't they? Blamed it on Major and not, I don't know, the Secret Service agent Major didn't like. And why did Major not like that Secret Service agent? Well, we're finding out a lot, aren't we? About a rogue Secret Service agency. In fact, it's so bad that Joe wanted his unit, team, Secret Service team from, I believe, when he was vice president. Because he could trust those guys. I hope. Now, I know that this is treading on the thin ice of conspiracy. And by thin ice, I mean that you have to jump through a lot of hoops to convince yourself that there's enough tensile strength to hold it all up on that thin ice. But here I go. If this was a Le Carre novel, it would be hard not to consider the fact that a rogue Secret Service agency who has access to his properties could plan a few things here, plan a few things there. Now, of course, the DOJ is not going to let us know what is going on outside of their filings because that's how it's done. And so, of course, the press is going to be all a titter, as David and Greg pointed out early on their show, or David's show. Yeah, I don't know. At least for when Greg's there. Anyway, the press is upset that they weren't told. Doesn't matter that Joe and team are and have been in communication with the DOJ before the DOJ even knows what's going on. That means nothing. Apparently, just by dint of the fact that this is going on, it's sort of like Hillary's email. So Hillary was dirtied by accusations, and therefore you can't have her in polite company anymore. Look, she's been soiled. Soiled by groundless accusations. Okay. I don't understand that mindset. I don't accept that mindset. But boy, that mindset sure gets away with it a lot. And so this is what they're doing with Joe. We know how dirty Donald Trump is. And his kids. So of course, there's going to be all of this news about how terrible Joe is in all these years. It's like, oh, well, I'm going off, aren't I? Preaching to the choir, but it is a bit of a concern. Because as I mentioned, they have a gossamer thin majority. They need Santos. They need that vote in the general caucus that they have. But he's not the only one under a magnifying glass. Kevin knows that. Kevin is not able to count votes, but he knows a few. He goes, well, I can't lose anybody. Isn't it odd that they're willing to keep a scofflaw like Santos and others? Because that's the only way they can keep Joe from governing. That's what this is about. This is the insurgency as it works within the machinery of government. Nazi Germany didn't just become Nazi Germany overnight. They used the mechanisms of government to take over. What do we do about it? Well, I'd like to purge all these Nazis from government, but that's me. I'm a romantic. I sort of like certain aspects of the Constitution as a whole. But I guess it would be too untoward now, wouldn't it? We can't really draw a criminal indictment against Santos because that might upset the balance of power. Really? That's the whole point. They got their largesse by ill-gotten gain. Anybody else, it would be civil asset forfeiture. That's what I would get. Civil asset forfeiture, his legislation and legislative seat, and we'll hold it in an escrow account. You can, petition to get it back if you're not guilty. Maybe you'll get it, and most likely you won't, because that's how civil asset forfeiture works. Well, like I said, I'm a romantic and I'm dreamy, idealistic. How terrible of me. All right, well, what is on the rest of the menu here, as we have curated, as I mentioned before, a whole slew of offerings for you. And what are they as we begin in the Bistro Cafe on this fabulous Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? Well, the EPA blocked an Alaska gold and copper mine over the environmental impact on the world's largest sockeye salmon fishery. The population of western monarch butterflies wintering along the California coast has rebounded for a second year in a row. And Maine utility regulators gave final approval to a wind power project that would provide enough electricity for at least 450,000 New England homes. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where state lawmakers may exonerate women and a couple of guys who were killed during the little-known Connecticut witch trials 375 years ago. And the Church of England shed light on its shameful slave trade ties. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, busy as she may be in real life. And thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do. If you would then take a gander across the page to the left and a little bit down from that chat room link there at near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink just once a month, if you could buy us one of those and send us those funds, we are able then to pool those, and with what we pull out of our own wallets, and pay our bills and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for so many years. Over 11 now. Yeah, or are we going on 11? I gotta look. It's been so long, and it actually doesn't seem long at all. It just flew by. Wow. But anyway, thank you for your generosity in helping us pay those bills so we can continue resisting those dark forces arrayed against representative democracy, not only here in the good old United States of America, but around the world. And if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. You can also follow us on Mastodon, and that would be Netroots Radio, Mastodon Plus. You'll find us there. Tom takes care of those platforms, and thank you, Tom, and everything else that you do as well. Follow me on Twitter. I keep saying I'm going to make a Mastodon account, and I will. And you can follow me there at Justice Putnam, which is on Twitter. And I'll get a Mastodon account, I assure you. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime. I know they want to call them stories, but they're diaries. That's how it started. I'm sorry. I'm just romantic that way. And within those show notes and links diaries, you'll be able to locate the actual articles that we are, presenting to you today without all of the funny or not so funny accents, clicks, pauses, mumbles, and mispronunciations. Okay, there you go. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Becca Borer and Patrick Whittle out of the Associated Press. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency took an unusually strong step yesterday, Tuesday, and blocked a proposed mine heralded by backers as the most significant undeveloped copper and gold resource in the world, because of concerns about its environmental impact on a rich Alaska aquatic ecosystem that supports the world's largest sockeye salmon fishery. Now, you have to understand it from the copper and gold mines' point of view. It was the largest sockeye salmon fishery in the world. Well, then they're not going to miss how many they may kill with arsenic and other heavy metals and poisons that they're going to leach into the water. It's their right, you know. The move, cheered by Alaska Native tribes and environmentalists and condemned by some state officials and mining interests, I wonder why, deals a heavy blow to the proposed Pebble Mine. The intended site is in a remote area of southwest Alaska's Bristol Bay region, about 200 miles southwest of Anchorage. The mine site is accessible only by helicopter and snowmobile in winter. Developer Pebble Limited Partnership said in a permit application with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as proposed, the project called for a mining rate of up to 73 million tons a year. An appeal by the Pebble Partnership of a separate rejection of a key federal permit is unresolved. In a statement, Pebble Limited Partnership CEO John Shively called the EPA's action unlawful. Really? I think they're the ones that make the law. John. And political. Really? I think it's because you're going to endanger the world's largest sockeye salmon fishery. Come on. And said litigation was likely. Well, of course we expect it from you oligarchs. Shively has cast the project as key to the Biden administration's push to reach green energy goals and make the U.S. less dependent on foreign nations for such minerals. Really, now. The Pebble Limited Partnership is owned by Canada-based Northern Dynasty Minerals. Well, they do that a lot up there in Canada. The Pebble deposit is near the headwaters of the Bristol Bay watershed, which supports a bounty of salmon unrivaled anywhere in North America, according to the EPA. The announcement marks only the 14th time in the roughly 50-year history of the Federal Clean Water Act that the EPA has flexed its powers to bar or restrict activities over their potential impact on waters, including fisheries. EPA Administrator Michael Regan said his agency's use of its so-called veto authority in this case underscores the true, irreplaceable, invaluable natural wonder that is Bristol Bay. Olga R. Rodriguez of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The population of western monarch butterflies wintering along the California coast has rebounded for a second year in a row after a precipitous drop in 2020, but the population of orange and black insects is still well below what it used to be, researchers announced yesterday, Tuesday. Volunteers who visited sites in California and Arizona around Thanksgiving tallied more than 330,000 butterflies, the highest number of these insects counted in the last 6 years. It was a promising rebound after the annual winter count in 2020 recorded fewer than 2,000 butterflies. In 2021, the number recorded was 247,000. I think we can all celebrate, and this is really exciting, said Emma Pelton, a conservation biologist at the Circe Society, a nonprofit environmental organization that focuses on the conservation of invertebrates. We were all so relieved last year when we had about 250,000 butterflies, and to see that number tick up even modestly this year, it's really a good sign that we've got a second chance. Pelton said it's not clear why the population has rebounded, but one explanation could be that eastern monarch butterflies, which tend to spend the winter in Mexico, could be mixing with their western counterparts. Some of that kind of leakage could be occurring, and I don't think we fully understand the system enough to say what it is, she said. But I think one thing it's not is that all is well, or that we all made human actions that magically made it all better. The population is still far below what it was in the 80s when monarchs numbered in the millions, and I can attest to that when I lived in Muir Beach. They blackened the sky. They really did. They were pretty, too. And all of the sativas and other plants that they like to hang out on. Scientists say the butterflies are at critically low levels in western states because of destruction to their milkweed habitat along their migratory route as housing expands into their territory and the use of pesticides and herbicides increases. Western monarch butterflies head south from the Pacific Northwest to California each winter, returning to the same places and even the same trees, where they cluster to keep warm. The monarchs breed multiple generations along the way for thousands of miles before reaching California, where they generally arrive at the beginning of November. Once warmer weather arrives in March, they spread east of California. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Maine utility regulators gave final approval to a wind power project that would provide enough electricity for at least 450,000 New England homes, along with construction of a new transmission corridor in northern Maine to get the electricity to the regional power grid. The unanimous vote by the Maine Public Utilities Commission on two projects bearing a net cost of $1.8 billion comes after Massachusetts endorsed the proposal, becoming a partner on the 1,000-megawatt project and allowing the costs to be shared by a larger pool of ratepayers. Under the plan, Maine ratepayers would be responsible for 60%, or about $1 billion of the costs. The average ratepayer would pay an extra $1 per month over the first decade, officials said. Developing renewable resources in northern Maine is a tremendous opportunity, and one that is critical to achieving decarbonization goals in Maine and New England. With support from both Maine and Massachusetts, I'm confident the selected projects are viable and give us the best chance to achieve a successful outcome, PUC Chair Philip Bartlett said. But commissioners still had reservations over the cost. They encouraged the participation of additional parties to further reduce costs for Maine ratepayers. Although Commissioner Patrick Scully supported the project, he suggested general revenue or bonds should be used to fund such projects to ease the impact on ratepayers. The Northern Maine project is separate to a $1 billion proposal fully funded by Massachusetts ratepayers that calls for a proposed 145-mile transmission line in western Maine that would be a conduit for 1,200 megawatts of Canadian hydropower to reach the New England power grid. Maine voters rebuked that project, called the New England Clean Energy Connect, and it remains mired in a legal battle. For the new proposal, state lawmakers directed Maine utility regulators to choose the projects to boost transmission capacity and renewable energy in Aroostook County. Last fall, the PUC chose LS Power Base for a 345 kilovolt transmission project and Long Road Energy's King Pine for a wind generation project. It calls for about 179 wind turbines west of Holton. Together, the projects would benefit the state by lowering electricity rates, reducing dependence on fossil fuels, and lowering carbon emissions, officials said. The project also allows far northern Maine to be connected to the New England regional grid for the first time. Dan Burgess, who leads the governor's energy office, said the projects would reduce our dependence on volatile fossil fuels and deliver significant new job and economic opportunities to communities in northern Maine. The project would produce 1,000 megawatts of power when the turbines are operating at peak efficiency, enough power for as many as 9,000 homes. Long Road Energy projects that the electricity will be adequate for 450,000 homes on an average annual basis. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, When Mom Goes Missing. The new film Missing starts with a pretty straightforward grab. A teenager's mom apparently goes missing after taking off on vacation to the always suspect Colombia with her new boyfriend. Using every app and database she can somehow access, 18-year-old June, played by Euphoria's Storm Reed, learns that her mother, played by Nia Long, may not be who June thinks she is. With more twists and turns than a snake with an itch, Missing is on its surface an entertaining thriller, one of an emerging category called screen life thrillers, which look at how our lives are becoming dominated by being online and on call 24/7, and how common and easy it is for tech-savvy people to curate online personas that have little or nothing to do with their real selves. Directed by Nicholas D. Johnson and Will Merrick, who gave us the very similar and successful Searching back in 2018, Missing clocks in at just under 2 hours, and thanks to some tight editing, never drags. Much like searching, it's recorded almost as a series of screenshots, a technique which brought the budget on that movie down to less than animated levels. More went into the real-life action shots, talent, and overall production this time for a more Cineplex-friendly, if a little less raw, underground feel, but one that also falls short on the character development derived from the online sleuthing we saw in the first, where we really learned about absent characters. This one seems to trade that for really, really contorted plot twist, which will keep you riveted until the final one that sort of hits the rails of believability. The screen life thriller probably isn't a long-lived genre as time and tech move forward, but for right now, Missing's a hell of a ride. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Chimpanzees can make tools, they display emotions, and they can outfox humans at certain memory games. But chimps also resemble us in another way. They use medicine. They're known to eat tough leaves and bitter plants to purge parasites from their guts. Now researchers have observed chimps applying a never-before-seen type of treatment. They snatch up flying insects and apply them to their wounds. You can see this happening in a video they filmed at Luango National Park in Central Africa.
Susie is sitting up, and then she's catching something from underneath a bush. She's putting it between her lips. She seems to press it, and then she's grabbing the foot of her son with a wound, and then she is applying the insect onto that wound.
Simona Pica is a cognitive biologist at the University of Osnabrück in Germany, part of the team that studies these chimps. She says it's possible the insects have antibacterial or soothing qualities, but this could also be a cultural practice with no medical benefit at all.
Maybe an individual just found out that it's intriguing, then I get a lot of attention, others come, maybe then I get some grooming. And so it just resulted into a social behavior.
After all, Pica points out that humans perform plenty of rituals with no obvious function. Her team reported their findings in the journal Current Biology. And they write that this could be an example of what's called pro-social behavior.
They help each other, and it's not just the mother helping her offspring, and it's not somebody helping somebody to increase their genetic benefits, but it's also individuals who are not related with each other.
As for the insects, the team has not yet identified any remains.
Because it's probably very, very tiny pieces, and we are primatologists, but now we talk to entomologists. And now we have an idea of how to find even smallest remains. And then there are also techniques to then identify the species.
If they do, they'll be able to learn more about what function this practice might have, if any. And perhaps we humans will be able to learn some medicinal tricks from our primate cousins. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work. but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Change the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The original pledge, written by Socialist Minister Ralph Bellamy in 1892, was, "I pledge allegiance to my flag, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." In the 1920s, the words, "the flag of the United States of America," were substituted for "my flag," a minor tinker. Then, in 1954, at President Eisenhower's urging, in order to combat godless communism, Congress inserted the words "under God" into the pledge. One nation under God, not a minor tinker. In the early 2000s, the majority of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the words "under God" were unconstitutional, just as the words "under Zeus" or "under no God" or "under Jesus" would have been. However, in 2004, the Supreme Court preserved "under God" in the pledge by ruling that the father who had brought the case for his elementary school daughter lacked legal standing because the student's mother got sole legal custody in the divorce. The issue of "under God" in the pledge has not been back to the Supreme Court since. Alfred T. Goodwin, the federal judge who wrote the appeals court opinion that ruled the pledge unconstitutional, died last December 27th at the age of 99. Judge Goodwin will be remembered as a jurist who stood up for principle. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1960. That was the day that 4 black freshman students from the Agricultural and Technical College of North Carolina sat down to make a stand for justice. Ezell Blair Jr., Franklin McCain, Joseph McNeil, and David Richmond visited a whites-only lunch counter at the Woolworth store in Greensboro, North Carolina. They were determined to challenge the racial discrimination of the Jim Crow South. They had planned their actions ahead of time, arranging for media coverage. The A&T 4 took their seats at the counter, ordering coffee and a slice of cherry pie. Soon, police arrived to eject the 4 black patrons. They refused to give up their seats. They stayed until the counter closed, returning the next day with more supporters. The sit-in had been a successful strategy of the U.S. labor movement in the 1930s. It was a powerful tactic to build solidarity, garner public attention, and bring about change. Members members of the Congress of Racial Equality had also used the sit-in during their organizing for civil rights in the 1940s. The Greensboro action sparked an unprecedented wave of sit-ins for civil rights. Mass mobilizations for sit-ins swept the South. That year, thousands of black students participated in sit-ins or marched in support of the actions. These black students faced insults, violence, and 1,500 were arrested. Their actions brought national attention to Southern segregation and helped to set in motion the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In 2010, the AFL-CIO held a 50th anniversary commemoration with the 3 living participants of the Greensboro sit-in. AFL-CIO Executive Vice President Arlene Holt Baker told the men, "We thank you for the vision, the faith, for being crazy enough to believe you could change America and make it better for us."
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 21 degrees Fahrenheit. Expecting highs actually in the low 50s, so a little bit warmer than what we've had in the last several days. A mix of clouds and sun during the morning will give way to mostly cloudy skies this afternoon. Winds light and variable. Clear to partly cloudy overnight with lows in the mid to upper 20s. Winds remaining light and variable, and then partly cloudy skies tomorrow in the morning will give way to mostly cloudy skies in the afternoon with highs in the low 50s. Pollen is rated none still here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the moderate range at 74 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.21 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 87%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 50 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 49 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 54 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 33 with snow showers. Kabul is 31 with light snow. Hong Kong is 66 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 44 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 72 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 43 and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is a freezing 32 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Susan Haig of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Decades before the infamous Salem witch trials in Massachusetts, Alcee Young was killed at the gallows in Connecticut, becoming the first person on record to be executed in the American colonies for witchcraft. The Windsor town clerk registered the death on May 26, 1647, in a diary entry that read, Alcee Young was hanged. Young was the first of 9 women and 2 men executed by the colony of Connecticut for witchcraft over 15 years, a period during which more than 40 people faced trial for having ties to Satan. Now, more than 375 years later, amateur historians, researchers, and descendants of the accused witches and their accusers hope Connecticut lawmakers will finally offer posthumous exonerations. While such requests are not new, they have become louder as many genealogy buffs discover they have distant relatives involved in the lesser-known Connecticut witch trials. Other states and countries have attempted to atone for a history of persecuting people as witches. Last year, Scotland's Prime Minister issued a formal apology to the estimated 4,000 Scots, mostly women, who were accused of witchcraft up until 1736. Of the 4,000, about 2,500 were killed. A Scottish member of Parliament last year called for posthumously pardoning them. In 2022, Massachusetts lawmakers formally exonerated Elizabeth Johnson Jr., who was convicted of witchcraft in 1693 and sentenced to death at the height of the Salem witch trials. Johnson is believed to be the last accused Salem witch to have her conviction set aside by legislators.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jill Wallace of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 3 centuries ago, an enslaved person in Virginia wrote to a leader of the Church of England begging to be released from this cruel bondage. There was no reply from the church, which at the time was accumulating a tidy profit from the transatlantic slave trade. The handwritten letter from 1723, whose author says they must remain anonymous for fear they will swing upon the gallows tree if exposed, has gone on display in London as part of efforts by the Anglican Church to reckon with its historic complicity in slavery. It is a very poignant document and also extraordinarily rare. Giles Mandelbrot, archivist of the church's Lambeth Palace Library, said yesterday, Tuesday. The letter is included in an exhibition at the library exploring the church's role in the 18th century slave trade. It coincides with a new report setting out that role in hard facts and figures. The church commissioners, the body that administers the church's $10 billion pound investment fund, hired forensic accountants in 2019 to dig through the church's archives for evidence of slave trade links. They spent 2 years poring over centuries-old ledgers, and what they found is shaming, the church said. The investment fund has its roots in Queen Anne's bounty, established in 1704 to help impoverished clergy. It invested heavily in the South Sea Company, which held a monopoly on transporting enslaved people from Africa to Spanish-controlled ports in the Americas. Between 1714 and 1739, the company transported 34,000 people on at least 96 voyages. The commissioner's report says the church at the time knew what it was involved in. Indeed. Well, you can read the rest of that article in the show notes and links diary, and please do. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.